The wind howled through the pines like a wounded animal. Snow whipped sideways across the mountain trail, stinging his face and stealing his breath. Levi Cartwright hadn't meant to get caught up here. He was just trying to make it back from the trading post before nightfall. But the blizzard had come down sudden and thick, like the Lord himself had slammed a door in his path. His horse, Molly, stumbled under him, sides heaving and steam rising off her back. They wouldn't make it another hour in this cold, maybe not even half of one. Then he saw it. Tucked between two crooked aspens, half swallowed by drifts, stood the old miner's cabin. He hadn't seen it in years. Folks said it was cursed, that a man had killed his own brother in their back during the gold rush. But right now, cursed or not, it was shelter, and shelter meant life. Levi slid from the saddle, wincing as his boots sank into the icy snow. Molly didn't even fight him when he tugged her toward the cabin. She was just as desperate. He yanked the door open and shoved them both inside. The smell hit him first, wet wood, iron, and something else. Something sour, sharp, sweat and blood. Then he heard her, a low moan, the kind that comes from deep in a person's gut, like something was being torn out of them. Levi turned, and that's when he saw her, curled on the floor near the back wall, her dress soaked through, her bare legs streaked with blood, and her hands tied tight around a rusty pipe with frayed rope that cut deep into her wrists. She looked up at him. Her face was gray with pain, lips cracked and trembling, dark hair plastered to her forehead. But her eyes were clear, sharp. She didn't scream, didn't beg, just stared. "Don't come closer," she rasped. Levi froze. His breath caught in his throat. He held up his hands slow. "I'm not going to hurt you. Just need a place out of the cold. You picked the wrong place." Her voice broke on the last word. Another moan curled out of her as her belly clenched, and Levi knew then she was in labor. He stepped forward, but she tried to twist away, crying out as the movement pulled at her bindings. "Hey," he said, kneeling, keeping his voice low. "You're going to tear your skin off doing that." She shook her head, eyes wide. "He's coming back." "Who?" She didn't answer, just squeezed her eyes shut and let out another raw cry as her body convulsed again. Levi looked around. The place was nearly empty, just a pile of firewood, a few busted crates, and a stove in the corner that looked half-rotted through. No food, no blankets, nothing that explained why she was here. He moved to the rope and tugged. "I'm cutting you loose." "No," she gasped. "You don't understand. If he comes back and I'm gone." He didn't wait. Pulled out his hunting knife and sliced the rope clean. She sagged forward, groaning, but didn't run. She just wrapped her arms around her swollen belly and rocked. "What's your name?" Levi asked, dragging the crates over to make a bed, then pulling off his coat to drape over her. "Maeve Larson," she whispered. "All right, Maeve. We need to get you warm. And we need to get that baby out." She laughed, but it was a hollow sound, bitter and frightened. "I've been trying." Levi wasn't a midwife, wasn't even married, but he'd helped deliver a colt once with his uncle. He figured birth was birth. Sort of. He grabbed some snow and packed it around her wrist to stop the bleeding. Her skin was bruised, the rope burns deep. Whoever had tied her there hadn't meant for her to leave. Not alive, anyway. Maeve clutched his hands suddenly, her grip like iron. "If I die," she gasped, "take the baby. Don't let him get it." "You ain't dying. You don't know him." "Then tell me." But she just shook her head, biting down on another scream. Outside, the storm raged on, the wind rattling the boards of the cabin like bones in a drum. Levi threw more wood in the stove, though the fire barely warmed the air. Maeve was sweating now, her hair sticking to her face in ropes, her body arching with each contraction. "You're doing good," Levi said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Just keep breathing. Like that. I hate him," she whispered suddenly, voice barely a thread. "I hate him for what he did, for leaving me here like this." Levi didn't ask who. He didn't need to. The fear in her voice told him everything. There was a crash outside. Not the wind this time. Something heavier. A boot crunching ice. The creak of the front step. Levi reached for his rifle without thinking. It was leaning near the door, half buried under his saddlebag. Maeve's eyes went wide, and she mouthed, "Don't let him in." The door handle twitched. Levi stood, heart pounding. "Who's in there?" A voice called, rough and slurred. "Maeve? That you?" She flinched. The door pushed open an inch. Levi moved fast, jamming the butt of his rifle against it. "Ain't no Maeve here. Keep moving." There was silence, then a low chuckle. "You ain't from around here," the man said. "That's my wife you got in there. My property. She's bleeding out on the floor," Levi growled. "Ain't nobody's property like that. Move." Oh, I put a bullet through the wall. Levi didn't answer. He braced harder, rifle ready. Behind him, Maeve let out a scream so loud it echoed through the cabin. He turned in time to see the baby crowning, her hands shaking as she reached down, tears running down her face. "I can," she sobbed. "Yes, you can," Levi said, dropping to her side. "Just one more. Come on, Maeve. You got this." Another scream, and then silence. A cry, thin and high. The door burst open. Levi didn't hesitate, raised his rifle and fired. The man at the door hit the snow hard, his body crumpling like a sack of grain. Levi didn't wait to see if he was dead. He kicked the door shut, dragged a crate in front of it, and turned back to Maeve. She lay slumped against the wall, face wet with sweat and tears, arms wrapped around the tiny, squalling baby. The child's cries cut through the room, piercing and alive. Maeve looked down at it like she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Levi knelt beside her, heart pounding. "Is it okay? Is the baby all right?" She nodded slowly, blinking hard. "It's a girl." He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "You did good, Maeve. Real good." But she didn't look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the door, on the dead man, just beyond it. "I thought he'd kill me before she ever came," she whispered. "He said she wasn't his. Said I'd been with someone else." She turned her head to Levi. "But I hadn't. I swear it. I believe you." Maeve held the baby closer, as if trying to shield her from memories that still hadn't left the room. The man outside, her husband, Levi assumed, hadn't even made it inside before Levi pulled the trigger. It had been instinct, raw, cold survival. But now that the gun smoke was fading and the crying had softened, the weight of it was starting to settle in his bones. Maeve shifted, trying to sit up straighter. Her body trembled with the effort. "Lie still," Levi said. "You're bleeding bad. I'll get something to wrap you with." He found a roll of clean cloth in his saddlebag, torn from an old shirt, and gently packed it against the worst of the bleeding. She winced but didn't complain. The baby was tucked inside her arms now, swaddled in his coat. Her tiny chest rose and fell with each breath. "He wasn't always like that," Maeve said after a moment, her voice hoarse. "Ethan, that was his name." Levi sat back on his heels, listening. "We got married young. Too young, probably. My daddy traded me off to settle a debt. Said it was for the best." She laughed bitterly. "Ethan worked horses. Couldn't read, couldn't write, but he was real proud. Real angry, too. Didn't take much to set him off. But I thought if I loved him hard enough, it would go away." "Did it?" Levi asked. "No. Got worse after the mine shut down. He started drinking, losing work. Thought every man that looked at me was trying to take something from him. By the time he brought me up here, I wasn't a wife anymore. Just something to chain to the wall." Levi clenched his jaw. He'd seen this kind of cruelty before. Men who wore their wounds like armor and used them to hurt anything that got close. But this, leaving a woman alone, pregnant and bound in a cabin during a snowstorm, this was something darker. They sat in silence for a time. The wind had slowed, though the snow still came down steady outside. Levi knew they couldn't stay here long. Once the storm broke, someone might come looking. Or maybe no one would. Maybe no one even cared. Maeve reached out and touched his sleeve. "You got a name?" "Levi Cartwright. From down near Ruidoso." "You married?" "No." She looked at him closely. "Why'd you help me?" He shrugged. "You needed help. Not everyone would have. Most would have walked back out the minute they saw me like that. said it wasn't their business. I'm not most people. She nodded slowly. No, you're not. Outside, there was a low groan. Levi was on his feet in an instant, rifle back in hand. He edged to the door and cracked it open. The man, Ethan, wasn't dead. He was trying to crawl through the snow, one arm dragging uselessly. Blood trailed behind him like ink on white paper. Levi stepped out and shut the door behind him. Ethan looked up, face pale, mouth twisted in pain. You don't know what she is, he rasped. I know what you are, Levi said, lifting the rifle again. But Ethan only laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. She lies. She's good at it. You'll see. She makes you feel like you matter. Then she pulls the ground out from under you. Levi didn't answer. He didn't need to. Ethan's words were like the wind, cold and empty. I gave her everything, Ethan said, coughing. Blood bubbled at his lips. And she took it. She took it all. You chained her to a pipe. She deserved it. Levi lowered the rifle. For a long moment, he just looked at the man. There was no fight left in him. Only poison. I should finish you, Levi said. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Then do it. But Levi turned and walked back inside. He sat by the fire without saying a word. Maeve didn't ask what happened. An hour passed. Maybe more. The baby finally fell asleep. Maeve did too, but only in short, restless spurts. Every time the wind changed, she jerked awake. Levi kept watch. The storm was breaking, stars starting to blink through the clouds. But that only meant the cold would get worse. They needed to move by morning. Maeve stirred again. Her voice was barely a whisper. What did he say to you? Nothing worth repeating. He lies, she said. He always did. Said I was nothing. Said no one would care if I disappeared. You're not nothing, Levi said. And you didn't disappear. She turned her head toward him. In the soft glow of the fire, her face looked older. Worn down, but her eyes were still sharp. Still alive. He killed my brother, she said suddenly. That's the part one never told anyone. He thought we were having an affair. But Joseph, he was all I had. When Ethan found us talking in town, he went crazy. Beat him half to death in the street. My brother never walked right again. He died 2 months later. Infection. Levi didn't know what to say to that. Maeve smiled bitterly. Ethan never even went to jail. Sheriff said it was a family matter. Levi had heard that before. Too many times. We'll go, he said, soon as it's light. There's a doctor in town, about a half-day's ride. He'll help you. And then we'll talk to the law. What law, she asked. The kind that looks the other way when women go missing. He didn't answer. She nodded. Didn't think so. But there was no bitterness in her voice this time. Just tired truth. Levi leaned back against the wall, the fire crackling between them. The baby stirred in her sleep, making a soft, breathy sound. What do you name her? He asked. Maeve looked down at the little girl. For the first time, she smiled, really smiled. Hope, she said. It was quiet after that. The kind of quiet that feels earned. Outside, the last of the storm whispered through the trees, leaving behind a silence deeper than the snow itself. And somewhere in that silence, a broken woman and a stranger with a rifle found something that almost felt like peace. The fire was down to glowing embers by the time the first light crept through the cracks in the cabin walls. Levi stirred from where he sat propped against the crate, muscles stiff from the cold and the tension that hadn't left his body since he'd stepped into the storm. Across from him, Maeve was curled on the makeshift bed, the baby resting against her chest. They'd made it through the night, and for the first time in what felt like forever, something close to peace hung in the air. Outside, the world was white and still, blanketed in a thick layer of snow. Levi stepped out quietly, rifle slung over his shoulder, and checked on the body. Ethan was stiff now, frozen in place, eyes wide open to the sky like he'd been caught mid-confession. Levi didn't feel relief, just a low ache in his chest. Killing a man never came clean, even if he deserved it. He dragged the body away from the cabin, far enough that Maeve wouldn't have to see it, then shoveled snow over it until there was nothing left but a low mound. He said no words. There was nothing worth saying over a man who had made every room he entered colder. Back inside, May was awake. Her eyes followed him as he knelt beside the fire and stoked the flames. The baby whimpered and began to fuss, and Levi handed her his canteen, still a little warm from being tucked near the fire overnight. "She needs a name," he said softly. "I told you," Maeve replied, rubbing the baby's back gently. "Hope." Levi nodded. "It suits her." They sat in silence for a while, the kind that didn't need filling. There was something strange about it all. How quickly people could become familiar when thrown into something raw and terrible. Levi barely knew Maeve, but in some ways, he knew more about her than he ever had with people he'd known for years. After they ate what little they had, hardtack and dried apple from Levi's saddlebag, he checked on Molly. The mare was standing, tired but steady. He'd have to walk most of the way to town to keep the weight off her, but they could do it. If the weather held, they'd reach the doctor by dusk. When he stepped back inside, Maeve was trying to stand. Her legs shook beneath her, and she caught herself against the wall, teeth clenched against the pain. "Hey," he said, rushing over. "What are you doing?" "I can't ride like this," she whispered. "I need to be strong enough to walk." "You're barely standing." "I have to try." There was no convincing her otherwise. So he helped her, steadying her under the arm as she took a step, then another. Every movement was agony. He could see it in her eyes, but she didn't complain. She just kept moving, slow and stubborn, like she was pushing against the very weight of the past. The baby stirred, letting out a soft wail. Levi picked her up, awkward at first, and cradled her in his arms. She was so small, so fragile. He looked down at her face and felt something twist in his chest. He didn't know if it was joy or sadness or fear, probably all three. Maeve saw him holding her and gave a soft, tired smile. "You're not bad at that. I've never held one before." "Well, you're doing better than Ethan ever did." They shared a quiet look then, not full of pain but something gentler, worn but open. For a second, the darkness in the cabin didn't feel quite so thick. They spent the next hour packing what little they had. Levi's coat, Maeve's torn shawl, the baby bundled in a saddle blanket. Maeve was determined to walk. Levi didn't argue again. He adjusted the saddle, looped the reins around his hand, and they stepped out into the cold together. The snow crunched underfoot. Sunlight bounced off the drifts in blinding flashes. Every so often Maeve leaned into Levi just for a second, and he could feel how light she was, how weak. Still, she kept going. "Where are you from?" he asked, just to break the silence. "West of Santa Fe. Little town no one remembers. My mama died when I was 12. After that, it was just me and my brother. Joseph." Her voice faltered. "He was the good one, the kind of person who made people feel safe." "I had a brother like that," Levi said quietly. "Caleb. He died in a barn fire 5 years back, trapped trying to save some livestock that weren't even his." Maeve looked up at him, brows drawn together. "Did you ever want revenge?" "I wanted to blame someone. Anyone. But it wasn't anyone's fault. Just bad luck." She nodded. Ethan blamed everyone for his pain. Never once thought it might have started inside himself. They walked for a long time after that. The baby stayed quiet, wrapped close to Maeve's chest. The wind picked up around noon, and Levi adjusted his coat around her shoulders to block it. It was near dusk when they saw the outline of the town, low buildings hunched against the hills, smoke curling from chimneys. Levi didn't realize he'd been holding his breath until it came out in a long sigh. "We made it," he said. Maeve swayed beside him, her steps faltering now. He caught her before she fell, easing her down onto a patch of clear ground near the road. "You rest," he said. "I'll get help." She gripped his arm, eyes wild. "Don't leave me. I'll be back fast. I promise." She didn't let go for a long second, then slowly released him. Levi ran. The doctor's office was near the church. Levi banged on the door until it opened, the old man blinking at him through round spectacles. "You got to come," Levi said. "She's weak, just gave birth in a storm, nearly bled out." "Her husband," he stopped. "Her husband's dead. It's a long story." The doctor didn't ask for more. He grabbed his bag and coat and followed Levi out, his steps surprisingly fast for someone his age. Maeve was still sitting where he left her, cradling hope against her chest. Her eyes met his, and when she saw the doctor, something in her face eased. The doctor worked fast, checking the baby, checking Maeve. He gave Levi a nod. They'll be all right. You got them here just in time. Levi sat on the porch of the clinic after that, waiting. The town was quiet, just the low sounds of life. Horses, a dog barking, a child laughing somewhere far off. It felt like a different world than the one he'd come from. The door creaked behind him. Maeve stepped out slowly, wrapped in a clean blanket, her hair braided back. She said, "We can stay the night," she said. "And that hope's healthy." He smiled. "Good." She sat beside him. They looked out over the town together. "I don't know what comes next," she said. "Me neither. I don't have any family left. No home. Just her. You've got me," Levi said, the words coming quiet but certain. Maeve turned to him, studying his face. "You mean that? I wouldn't have stayed if I didn't." She took a breath, slow and shaking. "I'm scared." "I know. Me too." The baby cried again, and Maeve rose to go inside. Before she stepped through the door, she looked back. "You should come with us. Tomorrow. Wherever we go next." Levi hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I will." And just like that, something shifted, slow and fragile, but real. Not the end, but something new, something almost like a beginning. They stayed in the doctor's cabin for 2 nights. The woman, Mrs. Talley, had been a midwife once, long ago, and though her hands were a little shaky, she handled Maeve and the baby with gentle care. Levi kept close, never far from the door, not quite sure what role he filled, protector, stranger, maybe something more. But each time Maeve stirred, each time hope cried, he was there. By the 3rd morning, the snow had started to melt in patches. Sunlight poured through the lace curtains, casting warm light on the hardwood floor. Maeve sat near the window, rocking Hope slowly, humming a lullaby Levi didn't recognize. He stood across the room, hands shoved deep in his coat pockets. "We should leave town soon," he said, not quite looking at her. "The sheriff might have heard something. A body out in the woods. That kind of news doesn't stay buried." Maeve didn't answer right away. She kept rocking, her eyes somewhere far beyond the snow-dappled trees. "I don't want to run," she finally said. "I'm tired of running." He crossed to her, crouching beside the rocking chair. "I know, but if someone finds out Ethan's dead, if they know you were there, do you think they'll believe me?" She cut in. "That I was chained to a pipe? That I gave birth on a filthy floor while he screamed through the door? I can still smell him, Levi. I still hear him." Her voice cracked, and she pressed her lips together tightly, trying to hold everything in. "I believe you," Levi said quietly. "But this world doesn't always listen to women who survive." She nodded, as if she'd known that long before he said it. That afternoon, Maeve asked Mrs. Talley for a pair of scissors. She sat at the kitchen table and began cutting her hair, clean and sharp, letting the dark strands fall around her bare feet. When Levi stepped in from checking Molly, he stopped in the doorway, startled. "You're sure?" he asked. "I'm not that woman anymore," she said. "She died in that cabin." He didn't argue. He just picked up the broom and swept the floor when she was done. Later, as nights settled again, Levi sat on the porch alone. He lit his cigarette, letting the smoke curl in the cold air. His hands trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from something deeper, a restlessness in his bones. The truth was, he didn't know what came next either. He'd spent so long drifting, never staying anywhere too long, never letting anyone in. Helping Maeve had been a gut reaction, but staying? That was something else entirely. He heard the door creak and turned to see her step outside, hope bundled against her chest. "You shouldn't be out here," he said. "She's sleeping," Maeve replied. "And I needed air." She sat beside him. For a while, they listened to the quiet. Somewhere nearby, an owl called out once, then again. "I've been thinking," Maeve said, "about what happens next." "Me too. I don't want to hide forever. I don't want Hope growing up thinking we're ghosts." "You don't have to," Levi said. But you're not bound to me, she said carefully. You don't owe me anything. He looked at her sharply. I don't stay out of debt. If I'm here, it's because I want to be. She looked down at Hope's face. And if one day you don't want to be? He didn't answer. Not because he didn't know, because the answer scared him. He'd lost people before. Everyone he'd loved had slipped away. What if he failed them too? The next morning brought news. A rider came into town from a neighboring settlement. Levi watched from the corner of the general store as the man leaned in to speak to the sheriff. A few words, a sharp glance. The sheriff turned toward Levi and Maeve, then looked away just as quickly. But Levi felt a chill anyway. That night, he paced the floor. They know, he said. Someone found the body. Maeve stood by the crib, tucking Hope into a bundle of blankets. What do we do? We leave. Now. But where? He hesitated. Then, there's a farm out near Pecos. Belonged to my brother. It's run down, but it's quiet. No one will come looking. She studied him. Why didn't you go back before? Levi sat down heavily. Because Caleb died there. Because I couldn't walk into that house without seeing the fire again. Hearing him scream. I left and never looked back. But you want to go now? He nodded. For you. For her. Maeve stepped toward him and knelt beside his chair. Then I'll help you face it. They left before dawn. The town was still, the skies streaked with pale blue and rose. Levi tied their things to Molly's saddle and helped Maeve up. She held Hope close against her chest, eyes alert but calm. They didn't say goodbye to anyone. The road was rough, but the sun held steady, warming the path as they traveled. By mid-morning, Levi's unease had grown. Every sound in the distance, a cracking branch, a bird's cry, twisted in his gut like warning bells. They stopped near a bend in the trail to water the horse. Maeve walked slowly, body still healing, steps cautious. You all right? Levi asked. She gave a short nod. Just tired. He looked back toward the trees. We're not alone. Maeve's eyes widened. What do you mean? He pointed. There. Tracks hoof prints. For horses, maybe 5. They passed through not long ago. Her face drained of color. They're looking for us. Levi's jaw clenched. Then we keep moving, but fear had settled in now, heavy and thick between them. The forest fell darker, each shadow too still. That night, they didn't light a fire. Levi stayed awake, rifle in his lap, eyes on the horizon. Maeve slept against a tree, arms around Hope. He wanted to reach for her, to hold her, and say everything would be fine. But he couldn't lie. When morning came, so did the riders. They heard the galloping first low, distant thunder, then saw the shapes breaking through the trees. Maeve screamed. Levi pulled her down, shielding her with his body as gunfire cracked through the air. He fired back once, twice. A man fell. The others scattered, surprised by resistance. Levi grabbed the reins and hauled Molly toward the woods, pushing Maeve forward. Go. Ride. I can't leave you. You won't go. She mounted, Hope cradled in one arm, reins in the other. Levi covered them, firing until the gun clicked empty. Then he ran. They regrouped miles away, in a narrow pass near the cliffs. Maeve was crying, not from pain, but from terror. I thought you were dead, she sobbed. I almost was. He pulled her close. This time, he didn't let go. That night, Levi broke down for the first time. He told her everything about Caleb, about the fire, about the guilt he'd carried like a chain around his neck. I left because I was scared, he said. But I don't want to be scared anymore. Not of loving someone, not of staying. Maeve kissed his hand. Then stay. With us. And he did. They reached the farm a day later. It was just as Levi remembered, weather-beaten, silent, the barn roof sagging with time. But the house stood. It still stood. Maeve stepped onto the porch, holding Hope, and looked around with soft, knowing eyes. It's not much, Levi said. It's enough, she replied. The wind whispered through the grass. And for the first time, in the quiet that followed, Levi felt something shift. Not fear, not regret, but belonging, even if it was fragile, even if it was hard. They had made it. But deep inside, both of them knew healing didn't come all at once. And peace had a price. The farmhouse creaked with old memories. Every floorboard, every dust-covered windowsill, whispered the life that once filled its walls. Levi hadn't been back in over 5 years, not since the fire that took Caleb. He'd always told himself it was because the land was no good, the house wasn't worth salvaging. But he knew better now. The house wasn't just haunted by smoke and ruin, it was haunted by guilt. The sun was just beginning to dip behind the hills when they arrived. Maeve stepped inside first, careful not to stir the dust too much as she moved through what used to be the living room. The baby was asleep against her chest, her soft breaths the only sound in the stillness. Levi followed, every step heavier than the last. He stopped in the doorway, staring into the burned-out kitchen. The roof above that corner had caved in long ago, but parts of the table still stood. The same table where he and Caleb used to sit, drinking coffee late at night, planning futures that never came. "I'll clear the back room," Levi said, his voice rougher than he meant it to be. There should be enough space for a cot. Maeve watched him disappear down the hall, her brows tight with worry. She'd seen the way his hands shook when he picked up the rusted kettle, the way his eyes flicked around like he expected to see someone sitting at that empty table. He spent the night patching the broken window in the back room, his fingers raw and splintered from working by lantern light. Maeve let him be. She could tell he needed to face the house on his own terms. But when the baby stirred in the middle of the night, crying softly, she found him outside, sitting on the porch steps, arms draped over his knees, eyes glassy from the weight of old ghosts. "You okay?" she asked, stepping toward him. Levi didn't answer right away. His voice came low when it did. He called out for me. Maeve sat beside him, pulling the shawl tighter around her shoulders. "I heard him screaming," he went on. "I was outside when it started, working in the field. I saw the smoke. I ran. God, I ran so hard. But I didn't get there in time." "You tried," she said gently. "I wasn't fast enough. I should have gone inside. I should have dragged him out. And you'd both be dead." Maeve said, "You lived. Maybe that's the punishment. Maybe that's the gift. But it wasn't your fault." He turned to her, pain written across his face. "I left because I couldn't breathe here anymore. Every room reminded me of what I didn't do." "And now?" she asked. He looked up at the house. "Now I see what's left. And maybe that's enough." The next day, they began clearing out the debris. Levi tore out the rotted floorboards in the front room, while Maeve scrubbed soot from the walls with water and rags. It was grueling work. Hope slept in a basket nearby, occasionally fussing, but mostly quiet. Every cry pulled Levi's attention like a string. He was learning the rhythm of her sounds. Hungry, tired, startled. She was still so new, still so small. But he could already see how strong she was becoming, how much she'd taken after her mother. By the third day, Maeve found Levi kneeling by the fireplace, holding something in his hand. It was Caleb's belt buckle, half buried under the floor. The metal was blackened, but the engraving still showed. "Hold fast." "I gave him this," Levi whispered. "For his birthday." Maeve knelt beside him. "He wanted you to keep it." He nodded, tears brimming. But for the first time, they didn't come from guilt. They came from love. From remembering Caleb not as a burned memory, but as someone who once lived fully, who laughed and dreamed and believed Levi would carry on. That night, the storm came back. Wind howled through the hills. Rain slapped the roof in sheets. The chimney groaned. Levi and Maeve worked fast to seal the windows, to keep the heat from escaping. The baby wailed, sensing the chaos. They lit every candle they had, pulled the cot close to the fireplace, and huddled under layers of quilts. Outside, trees cracked and howled. Inside, they held on to each other. Maeve clutched Levi's hand tightly. "I keep having dreams," she said suddenly, "that he's still alive, that Ethan comes back and finds us." Levi turned toward her, his face solemn. "He's not coming back. He can't hurt you anymore." "I know," she whispered, "but sometimes my body forgets." He reached up and gently brushed her cheek. Then I'll remind you. Every time, in that storm-lit room, with Hope sleeping between them, something broke open. Not just between them, but within them. All the things that had kept them locked in the past, the guilt, the fear, the shame, fell away just a little, just enough to breathe. The next morning, the sky was clear, blue as glass. The air smelled clean. They stood outside together, watching the clouds pass over the hills. Levi held Hope against his chest, rocking her gently as she kicked her little feet. "I think you'd be proud," Maeve said. "Who?" "Caleb." Levi didn't answer right away. Then he nodded. "Yeah, I think so too." Later, Levi walked down to the field. It was overgrown, choked with weeds and wild grass. But the soil was still good. He could feel it beneath his boots. He knelt down, ran his fingers through the dirt. It felt solid, real. He returned to the house with a strange energy in his chest. Purpose. "We can make this work," he said. "It'll take time, but this place, it could be ours." Maeve smiled, eyes soft. "It already is." That night, Levi stood by the window in Caleb's old room. He held the belt buckle in his hand again. He looked up at the stars. "I'm not running anymore," he whispered. "I'm staying. For her. For the baby. For you." Then he placed the buckle on the windowsill. A quiet tribute. A promise. He returned to Maeve's side, crawling beneath the blankets where Hope was already fast asleep. Maeve leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you feel it?" she asked softly. "What?" "The peace." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, for the first time." And he meant it. Spring crept in quietly. The wind grew warmer. The fields softened under thawing snow, and tiny shoots of green pushed up through the dark soil behind the farmhouse. Life, once buried, was returning, not just to the land, but to the people living on it. Levi woke early now, often before the sun. He liked the silence. He liked standing by the window with Hope cradled against his chest, watching the horizon pale from black to blue. Maeve usually stirred around then, sleep still heavy in her eyes, but soft in the way she moved, like she finally trusted the world enough to meet it with gentleness. She'd started smiling again, not always, not brightly, but with a quiet sort of warmth that settled deep in her cheeks when she looked at her daughter. Or at him. Their days followed a rhythm. Levi fixed the barn roof with salvaged wood from the fallen shed. They started planting in the garden, carrots and squash and beans. The baby grew stronger, fussier, louder. Sometimes Levi would stop mid-task just to watch Maeve in the yard, skirts hitched up, hair tied back, dirt streaking her arms. She looked more alive than she ever had in town. There was no longer a hint of the woman who'd been bound to a pipe. That woman, she said, had died in that cabin. Levi believed her, but something of her pain still echoed in Maeve's silences. One morning, as Levi washed up from chopping wood, he found Maeve inside at the table, sewing. She didn't look up when he came in, but she spoke. "I want to marry you." He froze, his hand halfway to the towel. "What?" I said. She looked up. "I want to marry you, but not for the reasons you think." He dried his hands slowly. "What reasons do you think I'd think?" She smiled, the corner of her mouth twitching just a bit. "Because we've been through hell together. Because you saved me. Because of Hope. But that's not why." Levi stepped closer. "Then why?" She set the needle down. "Because you make me feel safe when I sleep. Because I laugh when you forget words and call the spade a little flat shovel thing. Because when I see you with Hope, I don't feel scared of the future." He stared at her for a long time, heart thudding hard. "Okay," he said quietly. "Then I want to marry you too." They didn't have a preacher, or a crowd, or even rings. But a week later, they stood under the cottonwood tree behind the barn. Maeve wore a dress she'd let out and hemmed to fit her new body. Levi wore his father's coat, the one he hadn't touched in years. They said their vows with Hope asleep in Maeve's arms and the wind carrying their words away into the open sky. There were no witnesses, unless you counted the birds. Later, Levi built a small fence around the cottonwood, laid a flat stone at its base. "For Caleb," he said. Maeve knelt and placed a sprig of wildflowers beside it. They stayed there a while in silence. The farm became a place of slow healing. Each day brought a little more peace. But healing, Levi learned, wasn't a straight line. Maeve still woke from bad dreams. Sometimes she'd flinch when thunder rolled too loud, or when the wind slammed the door shut without warning. Levi would hold her hand and wait. He never rushed her, and she never turned away from him. Levi had his own ghosts. He still carried the weight of what he didn't save. But now he also carried something else, love. Not the wild, reckless kind that burned out fast, but the steady kind that stayed warm through the coldest nights. One quiet evening, after Hope had fallen asleep, they sat on the porch, wrapped in a wool blanket. The stars above were so clear it felt like they could see to the edges of heaven. Maeve leaned her head on his shoulder. "You ever think about the beginning?" she asked. "That storm, that cabin." "All the time," Levi said. "But not the part you think." "Which part, then?" "The way you looked at me," he said. "After the baby was born. You were still in pain. You hadn't slept. But you looked me dead in the eye and said, 'Don't let her die.'" Maeve swallowed hard, voice soft. "I remember. You were strong," he said. "Stronger than I've ever been." She shook her head. "No, I was scared, but I didn't have a choice." "You still don't," he said gently. "But now, you don't have to face it alone." She kissed him then. Not quick, not desperate. It was slow, steady, deep. The kind of kiss that meant, "I trust you." The kind that said, "I'm still here." They took their time that night. Levi carried her to bed, careful not to wake the baby. They moved like people rediscovering something ancient, something soft. There was no fear in her touch anymore. No flinching, only the hush of breath and skin. The warmth of two bodies finally allowed to want, without shame. Afterward, they lay tangled in the old quilt, Maeve's hair spilling over Levi's chest. "I feel like I belong to the earth again," she whispered. Levi kissed her forehead. "You never left it. You just needed roots." They kept building, one day at a time. Levi taught Maeve how to ride. She taught him how to make bread. They argued over stupid things, whether goats were worth the trouble, if they needed a second rain barrel, who last changed the baby. But even the fights were different. They ended with laughter, or quiet apologies, or a kiss at the back of the neck. Hope began to walk, then talk. Her first word was "boot," shouted gleefully after Levi tripped over his pair by the door. Maeve laughed so hard she cried. Visitors came, sometimes a traveling peddler, an old friend of Levi's from his cattle days. Even Mrs. Tally made the trip once, arriving with a bundle of yarn and a pocket full of dried apple slices. She called Levi settled. He just grinned. "You ever miss the road?" Maeve asked him one night. He looked around their tiny room, the cracked lamp, the worn floor, the baby snoring softly in the corner. "Not once," he said. They still didn't go into town much. Maeve wasn't ready. People had long memories, and the story of Ethan's body being found frozen in the woods still lingered like smoke. But no one ever came knocking. No lawman ever arrived. It was as if the world had quietly decided to let that chapter close. One morning, Maeve stood on the porch, watching the sun rise. Levi came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How far we've come." He pressed a kiss to the side of her neck. "Still a long way to go." "I know, but I'm not afraid of it anymore." They stood there a long time, watching the light spill across the hills, golden and slow. A new season was starting, a quiet, ordinary one. But to them, it felt like a miracle. Levi used to think survival was the end goal. But now, with Maeve in his arms and Hope chasing chickens across the yard, he understood something deeper. Survival was just the beginning. Living, truly living, was what came after.